So it's Danny Flexen here for Seconds Out. Delighted to be joined by esteemed boxing writer there for the Daily Mail, Jeff Powell. Jeff, how you doing, mate?
Very well, thank you.
Glad
nice
to hear
see
it.
you even at long range.
Jeff, you've been covering this sport for even longer than I have, or much longer than I have, in fact. You've seen it all, I think it's fair to say. Is there anything new in this Fury and Ngannou from what you've seen so far, or the spectacle of it?
If you start with, is there anything new about these kind of strange fights? No. I mean, Muhammad Ali went to Tokyo to fight a wrestler called Inoki, and he nearly lost a leg doing it. He got kicked in the leg so much by the guy who's all he did was lay on the ground and kick him, that there were two huge blood clots in his left leg at the end, and they wanted to amputate. And he had to refuse to amputate. But it was towards the end of his career, and he was a bit handicapped in the last few fights. So these odd fights happen. It was declared a draw, which all these fights usually are, and he survived with both his legs. So you expect it to be a load of nonsense, but it's possible for things to come unstuck.
A load of nonsense, Jeff, but we're both covering it, so there must be some redeeming features there. Is it that Frank Warren keeps saying it's an event, it's a spectacle? Is it that side of it?
First of all, it's Tyson Fury. We're both in the media business, and Tyson Fury is news if he blows his nose. He's a performer. He's an entertainer. He's a great fighter. And whatever he does, you're kind of obliged to be there and see him. He's fun to be around, so it's not too much of a hardship. It's not exactly what we want to see him do, but we hope this ends up with him doing what we want to see him to do with Alexander Usyk fairly shortly.
And with that in mind, does Fury Usyk add more interest in this Ngannou fight for you, or is it more a shadow hanging over it that we're all concerned in case of a freak injury or something like that?
Yes, well, there's many a slip between cut and lip, isn't there? So these things can happen. There is a concern about that. I mean, hindsight would suggest if something like that happens that it wasn't a good idea to do it. But I think Tyson looks pretty relaxed about the whole thing. You know, I was joking around last night, and I was doing an interview, and I leant back on the ringside, draped my arms over the ropes, and went, I think Tyson's as terribly nervous about this fight as I am for him.
Now, before we talk about the fight itself, quote unquote, I want to ask you about Saudi's influence on boxing. Is it now the new power base? Has it superseded Las Vegas in your view?
Well, no, I don't think so. I mean, Las Vegas has Canelo. Las Vegas had Spence and Crawford. The big fights are there. They're interested only in the big heavyweight fights here. They bring a lot of money to the heavyweights and to the sport. They bring interest in other markets to boxing. They'll probably expand that interest as time goes by, as they do with all sports. Is it a bad thing? Yes, I guess we'd rather see Tyson fighting in Wembley or at Vegas or in Madison Square Garden from our sense of the history of the sport. But, there's room for something new in this business. It's a sport that needs an injection of vitality. If that requires an injection of large amounts of cash, then we can accept it and live with it and possibly benefit from it.
We've got this big event taking place Saturday. Next week, WWE are in town. And then there's a good chance that Eubank Jr. and Ben will go at it in Abu Dhabi, which isn't too far away, in December or maybe January. Is it that the time zones are so similar between there and the UK that there is a market for these fights in the Middle East involving UK fighters?
Well, with UK fighters, yes, but it doesn't help them much with the American market because the time difference is even greater than it is between Las Vegas and London. So, it's kind of a bit imprisoned by the time zones as to, which fighters it can take. there wouldn't be much point, really. There wouldn't have been much point putting Crawford Spence on here with 10-hour time difference to the west coast of America. It becomes almost unplayable. You've been having it for breakfast. So, yeah, there's limitations on them. How many big fights are they going to take? I guess they're going to get Fury Usyk in a couple of months' time. That appears to be the plan. If by some chance Ngannou landed uncorked a belter and produced the one of the greatest upsets of all time, there would be a rematch. That would be here. But what happens once you've got the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world is interesting. Perhaps the only sort of out-of-area fight they might be interested in would probably be a fourth fight. Let's hope Fury wins against Usyk. It would probably be a fourth fight between him and Wilder, because there's a man of great entertainment value as well as great skill, and there's one of the biggest punchers, or the biggest puncher since Mike Tyson. So they probably would juggle with the time distance to put that on here.
And going into the fight itself, Fury's not known as a concussive puncher necessarily, but is there a chance he carries Ngannou, lets him hang around longer than is necessary?
Well, if the Usyk fight wasn't so imminent, I would say possibly yes. But the longer he sort of carries it for appearance's sake to make it look real, the way Mayweather did with Conor McGregor, the more danger there is of some freak accident. I could see perhaps a couple of rounds while he has a proper look at him in the ring and decides how he's going to finish the job, and then maybe a couple more to get the job done. I don't think he'll hang around forever. He'll give it about 4 or 5 rounds maybe, and then think that's probably enough, and let's get on with the next business on the agenda.
And just before I let you go, Jeff, another British heavyweight in Anthony Joshua has been making a lot of news this week from his retreat into the isolation house, or whatever it's called, to talking about switching trainers once again and suggesting he may yet fight Deontay Wilder on the Fury Usyk card. What do you make of AJ's behaviour in recent days?
I think he's in a bit of trouble psychologically. I think he senses that time has caught up with him somewhat. A couple of setbacks he's not been able to handle. He's not been the same since the Andy Ruiz knockout. He's become a much more wary fighter, a much more timid fighter. He has boxing ability, but that's not been his strength. His strength has been to go in and knock people out, and he doesn't appear to be prepared to take that kind of risk anymore. I think he's trying to sort his head out, and you feel for him a bit. Tyson sort of mocks him for saying, is that what he's come to, trying to beg to be on my undercard, which is a fun line. But Tyson, who's been through all his own psychological problems, might privately feel for him. It's not good that he's gone into a darkened room, in my opinion, although if it turns out to work for him, good for him. I think he needs to re-engage with the fight world properly. He had become somewhat aloof from it. He'd become like when everything in the garden was rosy, he'd become a kind of I'm going to be a corporate figure as well. I'll sign a few autographs the way a big celebrity does. He's quite polite, but he was becoming a different animal, and I think it's difficult for him now to readjust. He's got to go back into the trenches and get back to fighting. That's what he needs to do, and as soon as possible. I worry for a guy who wants to sit on his own in a darkened room, especially one with a quite gregarious personality as he has. I think we should be concerned for him, but I fear that we've seen the best of him.
Jeff, really appreciate your time. Enjoy the rest of the week in Riyadh, and we'll see you when you get back.
Pleasure as always.
Cheers, Jeff.